well.
Can we just have a quick listen?
I might be cool just chatting briefly about what you guys do and how it started and sort of history. Thank you.
Right. So we started in Brighton about 25 years ago. We started in Molescombe. There's been a murder in the park there, you know, Wild Park.
Yeah.
Two young girls.
It's a murder in the woods.
Two very young, well, you know, 13-year-old girls who got murdered there. And there was some implications that the park was no longer a safe place to be. Obviously, it opened questions about, I don't know if you've been to Wild Park, a very nice place, but obviously it's got sort of bits that were a bit out the back. And there was also some implication that possibly there was someone in the community that had been involved. And the company started as a Reclaim the Park initiative. And that's the sort of initiative that's a short-term initiative where people work with a community, try and do something very positive in the space where something's gone wrong. And my predecessors, Pippa, who's now runs the Dome education programme, and Chris, who's retired but used to write for Doctor Who, got together in an interview. Funnily enough, they lied in the interview and said they knew each other and went for a job share because they both wanted the job but they didn't want to be full-time. And then they set up the company. And then I think after about a year of that, then it became Same Sky. And then after about another year, it started to get more of an identity. And then after about 3 years, it did the children's programme, some of you will have probably seen through town. And that sort of started the big momentum. It was based in a porter cabin on the Watts, near the Watts building, which is one of the university buildings, up Lewis Road. It was cold. And then I think I came to Brighton probably 20 years ago, and then started working with the company as a freelancer probably about 18 years ago. My background is theatre and visual performance and outdoor art. So that sort of fitted in with a lot of the stuff. And then for a long time we were quite small and we did shows in woods, trails, workshops in schools, and then the children's parade got bigger and bigger. It started with 5 schools, and it was on a Friday night at 4 o'clock, which is a bit of a silly time. You imagine everyone was trying to get home. So you ended up with, you know, in North Street, they only shut one side of the road, so the children went up one side, and all the cars were still coming and the buses down the other side. And you were just trying to steer children away from traffic. And now obviously it's moved to Saturday and it shuts the town down. So I suppose that's our, from the outside, a lot of people, particularly in Brighton, think that the Children's Parade and Burning the Clocks, which are the two big Brighton events, are what we do. But in effect, actually, they're only what we do in Brighton. A lot of the other work we do isn't possible to be done in Brighton because there's too much going on here, probably. And we've got too big a slice already with those. So today we've been to Kent, we're a bit late, and we've been looking at a park in Sittingbourne, which is sort of near the Isle of Sheerness. And there they've got a park that's just been made on a landfill site, so it's very rough. And they want to start a similar, actually it's not murder, but they want to start a thing where people nearby like it. And we're talking about, we may not get the job, so we pitch like people do for any type of work.
We did pitches last week, yeah.
That's why I'm still a bit...
Yeah.
You get an hour, and Dan and I went and pitched, and I would have said, you just end up, if you're not careful, you just go at them, because we're not desperate for work, but we've had some of our funding cut, so we're very keen to get work.
Did you set your budget, or did they have the budget set?
You've got a figure and then we had to work within it. Yeah. I would have said, you said that, was it?
Yeah, that was it. They told us how much there is, and they told us what they want to do. They want to have a big event, they want to have some community engagement, and they asked us to put together a plan to how we can do that for them, and how we'd split up the budget that they'd set for it.
So how do you organise it? Do you just sort of do it all through email, or do you sort of do like a mini meeting every week? Or?
Well, to begin with, at the moment, all we're doing is pitching for the work. So there's, so they basically give us nothing for that. We've got to go and do background work, do some research. I found out about the area, Done a couple of site visits, go up and visit the park that it's due to be in. Put together an application, put together a PowerPoint presentation, which is just basically slides of our work, and decide how we're going to approach it. Then we go up and interview for it. Up until the point that they phone up and tell us that we've got it or we haven't got it, there's no money whatsoever. So it's quite a lot of investment of time and energy for that. When we get the work, that's when, most of it will be by email and telephone conversations, which will be, probably end up being in touch with them 2 or 3 times a week, and on Sundays lots and lots and lots. And then there'll probably be visits and meetings with them every couple of weeks running up till the event.
It's slightly complex because that one's got a community remit, so sometimes we work with schools only, and then they're quite easy to engage with. You go along, they're all there, you expect them to turn up, you do a workshop in a school class. It's also quite sort of predictable in the sense that you know what's going on. When you do a community engagement, it might be that you're looking for groups to work with, so it might be a youth club, it might be a young mums group, it might be Women's Institute, it might be a motorbike maintenance group, it might be anyone that you can find, dog walkers, and then they're a bit harder to find. So for this one, I think we're going to need to find local people that know. There's always someone somewhere that knows all of everyone, and they're not always obvious who they are. Sometimes they're not actually the person that people tell you they are. It's someone else, and sometimes it means going to the local post office or the shop, and saying, who is it that you talk about?
It's the same as if you go into school. I used to work in a school. Same as if you go into a school and you start talking to the students, they normally know which teachers are the ones to talk to if you want to get a project off the ground, or if you want to get a group of students to come and do something. Go and talk to the teacher who does it already, before already taking students in. You kind of know who those active types of people are.
How competitive is it, like, for the pitch?
This one was probably 4, shortlisted to 4.
Right.
We don't know who they were. We imagine we know probably that 1 or 2 of them might be from our sort of peer group of companies in the southeast. So there's probably about 3 companies like ourselves of our scale, possibly 4. And one of them is in the bottom of London, the Emergency Exit Arts in Greenwich, and Strange Cargo in Folkestone. And this place is somewhere in there, so it's a sort of.
And we're probably up against individual artists.
I think with this one, they'd sort of asked for a creative producer as well for it, so it could be that someone, which is why we've got a sort of capacity to deliver all the bits. So sometimes we're more attractive because it's less work for someone who's lazy. So if you're an arts organiser who's busy or lazy, it could be busy, let's say busy, it doesn't involve quite so much. I mean, we do our own risk assessments, we do our own production, we have vehicles, access to vehicles, we have drivers of larger vehicles. We've got a big freelance community. Although there's 3 of us, there's Dan, myself and Sharon, who's the other permanent member. We have about 25 freelancers that we work with throughout the year. As the cuts have happened, we've got less and less work for them, and we're doing more, which is why we're looking a bit boggled as well. We tend to do a lot more of the hands-on work. All 3 of us are artists, and we all do workshops in schools. So next week I'm out in primary schools in Gravesend, eastwards, making stuff here, making small. You've probably seen the children's parade, making small items that take a day to make, and that they'll be lit. This time of year we do quite a lot of lit parades because it's dark early, and it's also the Festival of Light. So lots of religious faith communities have celebrations around it being dark and around light. We have a little sort of cluster of those because we're not religious at all, but we like to sort of have the. I've got that out there. What's that doing? Something tasteless.
If you move carefully, Jesus winks at you.
Don't want to know. There's a thing about the winter, so we're secular in that we don't have religious beliefs as a group. Some of us might do it individually, but we quite think that quite a lot of religions have put these events in this time of year, partly to cheer people up in the middle of the winter, partly because it's a nice time of year. And we make things that basically are like these ones here. And
so you're probably familiar with lanterns, or you might And have you been on Children's Parade or burning the clocks?
Yeah.
So you probably carry things on sticks down through the streets of town like that. That's the sort of basic, the very simplest lantern that can be made, and we sell packs of those. We've got lights on sticks.
How's that funded, the Children's Parade?
Counselling.
Council.
Council funding.
Is that the same for burning clocks?
Yes.
That's only partially funded.
And yeah, the thing is that we as a company have been in the past funded by the Arts Council, which basically gets the money from the government. They're the big central arts funding for all of the country. But guess what? They just got cut, like everybody else, and we've just been cut. So we're losing all of that funding. That was about a quarter of our income in the past. So we've lost a member of staff, and we've gone from a team of 4 to a team of 3. And that would, all of that would have supported the Children's Parade, burning the clocks, and other events like that. But what are you also? I missed the beginning. You probably already said. Are you all art students, or what's your interest? Where are you coming from in your visit? What are your questions? What are you interested in?
Media students.
Media students.
Yeah.
We do a creative art and media diploma.
Got you do the creative arts. Yeah.
This unit is all about working, creating a brief, pitching, and interacting like a community.
Okay.
So I think we're veering towards maybe looking at pitching something to Big Issue, and then we'll create like a product for them.
Great.
For their website.
Great.
So we're working with community arts groups and stuff as well.
Yeah. Great. We've been talking about that quite a lot lately, about how we pitch for work, and one of the things, it's a bit of a sort of classic piece of advice, if you like, but we need to take it ourselves. You know, it's one of those things that you're constantly learning, is that when you're pitching for work, the tendency is to go and say, here I am, this is what I do, what you want is me, and really what you need to do, what we've been concentrating on, changing our pitching so that you really research very carefully what it is that they're looking for, and you go in and say, God, it's visionary what you're looking for. Yeah, that's brilliant. How did you think of that idea to ask people to come and do this? We've been hoping that something like an opportunity like this will come along because we can fill it, but really making it their thing that you're helping them to fulfil and thinking about what their needs are instead. It's just same thing marketing thing.
That's what we were sort of doing last week, wasn't it? But I mean, we were just looking on the website to make something slightly about us. But I don't know, where do you look if you're doing it? If you're looking like trying to pitch to them?
Yeah, I suppose website, try and get information from them, try and sort of lurk and get the person that you're pitching to give you some information beforehand, try and find out local contacts. So this one was linked to wildlife as well, wasn't it? Or potentially linked to the wildlife in this area. So they've covered a landfill. They've made an ornamental park that isn't actually ornamental yet. It's just like scorched earth that's been organised into sections. And then they've got with play furniture for kids, some of which has been stolen and made into scrap. And then at the back there's a sort of wildlife sanctuary. So you find out that actually they're interested in the great crested newt, which is some kind of small beast. So there's an element where possibly some of our clients have obviously got a remit to deliver certain other elements. So we don't, some projects are fully art orientated, but some of them aren't. Some of them we're actually acting as using our art practice as an agent to get their message over. So there's various projects in the south at the moment. One's in the forest area, the Ashdown Forest, which is not a wood, it's a whole area where they've had a lot of money from the lottery to do it up, but it's pointless if people don't go and see what they've done. And people aren't accessing woodland anymore. Normal people like ourselves probably don't go out as much, so it's trying to encourage people that there's a benefit going there, so they've employed us to do workshops. And then that was around the fauna and flora of the woods. And then we might have one that's completely urban, so we're working on white knights at the moment as well. Okay. And we're working on with the youth rangers from the Wildlife Trust, who are going to do something on the beach around sea life. And then we're working with Urban Golf, who are wanting to do golf around the city. So they're very different types of quite conflicting sort of remit.
a lot of what we do is what they call site specific. So a site visit is really important, to go and see the place that you're creating stuff for, and really make sure that as you're standing there in the space that it's going to work, that you know where people are going to come in to see it, where are they going to be standing when they're looking for something, where are they going to gather, whether they, you know, what's their whole experience of what it is that you're putting on, if it's an event or if it's a piece of art for them to look at. Really, you know, physically walk yourself through it and make sure that you've seen it probably a couple of times before you pitch, before you actually go forward and present your ideas, so that when you are pitching you can then refer to that when you're telling them. So you really prove that you know your spot, you know all about that site, you've really looked at it, you've done your research, you're constantly proving that you've done the background work on it.
What do you make apart from like lanterns and parade stuff? Like what else do you make for people?
Grab some stuff off the notes board over here for what sort of things that we have around. So we do a lot of processional stuff. We do a lot of light installation stuff. John is a lighting designer. So this is one which we've done for a project this summer.
What's it made of?
It's made of same as this. So the white is the tissue paper, and it's made with these sticks, but it's 7 metres tall. So it's a tree that's 7 metres tall, and the centre trunk of it is actually the post out of a circus big top. You know what I mean? Yeah, it's all one we've got.
Did you do installations for White Night last year?
Yeah. And we're doing them again this year. So yeah. So we do bits and pieces like that too. The Phoenix sculpture there is that's a lanternised sculpture. So that's taller than me and got lighting inside, made out again of the same material as this.
Yeah, we probably use this quite a lot because those things up there, because there's some boats that have been made in St Martin's Primary School, where they've made a sail out of maps. Yes, it does, and also it's incredibly cheap. So if you've got a low budget, it's quite quick.
But it's wet strength tissue paper, so it doesn't mush.
So if it rains, it won't all be ruined?
Not immediately.
No, it takes eventually, you know, if it's completely torrential, it doesn't.
How permanent are your sculptures?
Not at all, Tim. Not at all permanent. Not like
None of this is.
How long they last?
We've made things that are still going 5-6 years on.
Yeah, I mean some of these things come in and out, and they get repaired.
So we take them back to our store.
If you put this in your garden, it would probably last a year, possibly. If you maybe go to the paper with something other than just PVA.
But some of it is designed that it doesn't last. You know, if you go on burning the clocks and take a lantern, then the whole point is that at the end of the procession, you pass your lantern over, it gets put on the pile, and part of the finale, which happens on the beach where there's going to be pyrotechnics, there's going to be choreographed action going on, is that also then gets lit and it's burnt, and your wishes for the winter solstice go up to the heavens with the flames and the smoke from your lantern.
You can see this is a factory here, so these are going to be made into packs and they're sold at the museum, the pavilion shop, and then the pack allows you to make 2 lanterns, and it costs around 16 to 20 quid depending on what we set, depending on what the cut they want is, and then that allows you, here you can see a package. So you've got paper, sticks, glue, sponge, tape, all ready to go, and then an instruction sheet, and you get to come to the event. That allows someone to, one, come to the event and be in the parade without us having to do a workshop, because we're broke, but also probably about £1,000 from the process, other than we make it all night like mice, comes back to us to fund the event. And it's not really cost effective, but it is in the sense that we're only exploiting ourselves to work that, and
It's only
our friends. Hazel's in there. Yes. So Hazel is an artist that works with us, and is a textile artist, so we also do other things like flags. This is something she's made, which is a giant inflatable skull for Day of the Dead. That would just about, not quite fit in the height of the room. It's powered by computer fans. So we do make other things. And there's not a lot we won't try and do. With pride we make floats, so we do some bigger float items. This material is really very flexible and really easy to work with, so we do make quite, you'll see if you look in the middle of here, there's both these two structures are made with it. So this is a giant Barbara Windsor. Yeah, so she's made with a larger version of this. And this is a sort of skit on Icarus for projects in Nottingham. Still some of those left in here.
Yeah, I mean, we're constantly playing around with stuff, so we also use flags quite a lot. Pound shop at the moment, or a little while ago was doing these really cheap, they're the sort of marathon blankets that you get, or sort of keep you warm emergency blankets, but you could get two for £1. So right, nice material, looks good. And just messing around with making some flags that will probably get used during the burning of cloth. So yeah, it's all kinds of materials and all kinds of things, but it's generally fairly well, there's a lot of low tech combining with John's sort of high tech lighting expertise.
You can see that that's the Icarus. So that bit there is taller than a person, and then there's the other half of it. And there's the
How long
maquette.
did that take?
It's probably a couple of weeks, but with a crew. And that was made in Nottingham, and then the community members made these items, which represent their groups. You can probably take a couple of these. Yeah, you can see an old people's group made a dancing old couple, and then these were paraded and then burned. And it's based on something that happens in Spain in Valencia called the fires, which is these sort of more Disney-like sort of structures and burn them. And that's about purging, apparently, because they're quite weird. Some of them are quite almost close to pornography. You go on the street and you think, what the hell is that doing there? But actually it's about having difficult feelings and then burning them to purge them from your system.
We get a bit pagan.
We haven't quite persuaded people. We get close, we haven't quite.
Some of those, they're as big as a house and made out of polystyrene, and they burn them.
They used to be made in a similar method to ourselves, with lathing. Old walls and houses used to be made, but now they use polystyrene because it's lighter. And they make a maquette, a model of the structure, and then they cut it, they cast it in resin, and then they cut it into slices like that. That's, I think, a centimetre, and then they make the same slices out of 20 centimetre polystyrene, so you end up building.
And they burn that?
And they burn it. It looks like a weird sort of marshmallow as it goes.
Are the fumes not toxic?
Well, they claim that they're not.
Yeah.
You'd never get away with it in England, it's in Spain.
They have 450 that burn at the same time.
And then, I mean, when you're there, it's also, you might be in a city square with like 5-storey buildings all the way around, and they literally cover the buildings with cloth, hang sheets down over them, and the fire brigade are there before it's lit, hosing down the building fronts with water so that they don't set the buildings
That's mad.
on fire. It's worth going to if you ever go to. I saw it. It's in March every year. It's called Las Fallas, but it's the Feast of San Jose, St Joseph's.
F-A-L-L-A-S.
And it's an interesting example because it started where carpenters used to clear out shavings from their studios or their workplace, their ateliers on that day, and burn them, and then kids took over and made guys, and then they went after the war. They started making bigger and bigger effigies, and now there are, I think it's 430. So if you were doing it in Brighton, every sort of junction of a street would have one, and then they pay an artist to do that, and they do a lot of the work with them. And there's a whole town outside of Valencia that only makes. It's a bit like if you go apparently to Rio, there's a city that makes carnival stuff. So there's a whole sort of complex of places where there's costumiers, there's props, and they make it all as a creative industry. Brighton's very good for creative industry, but we haven't quite got that sort of zone.
Getting a bit of a random slice from us, but to give you an idea of the sort of thing that I just met outside the door Amanda, somebody who you've been talking to about something that's happening in Over Town Hall, 5th and 6th of November, which seems very soon, called Whale Fest. And what she's approached John Paul, I understand, they want to put a life-size blue whale inside the town hall.
Inflatable, yeah, it's a small one, it's not a
And they need a blubber belly so that people have the experience as they go into the town hall of walking on into the guts of a whale, right? Like
Yeah.
Jonah and the whale. And we've got some inflatable tongue that might serve as
And they want
intestinal
they
kind
want the
of.
things the young people are making for the beach to show again. So that's where our interest is. 'Cause these youth rangers are going to make recycled plastic sort of sea beasts that light up.
Step inside a whale's stomach and experience the weird and wonderful world of blubber belly, encounter the strange creatures that whales swallow, and listen to the amazing sounds of the deep.
So they advertise this before it's made.
Yeah.
We've talked to them, so we know we can do something.
I think basically they've got a load of stalls there, and they've got. I think you pay to go in. I can't quite imagine why you would want to go. I'm cynical.
£9
Yeah,
for the day.
but they've got a whole range of inflatable whales and things.
Or free entry if you can be or pretend to be under 16. You're more likely to get away with that than us.
How do you measure the success of a project?
We were asked that today. It depends. Partly what the motivation for doing the project is. So if it's a client, if it's somebody who's come to us and asked us to do something or pitch for the work, they might have some very specific measures about we wanted to engage 4 schools in this area, we wanted to engage this group of young mothers, and we wanted to talk to other users of the park. And at the end of the project we can say we did workshops in X, Y, Z with X number of people, and give numbers like that.
Do you ever gather like feedback?
Yeah. So more and more, we're rising up to our marketing really, and things like gathering testimonials.
Yeah.
So experiences that people have had, where they give us your glowing report, and you've got to catch them at the event, at the gig, and make sure you write it down there and then, or simply ask people to write testimonials for you. But a lot of the things that we do, we were talking about to our clients today, is that a lot of the really, the great results that can come out of this kind of work are really difficult to measure. What they want is their local community to take ownership of that park. There are people who live on a street away from this park that used to be a wasteland, used to be the dump. Basically, it's been covered over, it's been landscaped. People who don't know it's been turned into a park and never ever visit it. So the council have an interest in getting the local community to sort of use the park, but really feel like it's their park. How do you measure that? It's quite a difficult thing to sort of say, well, I've got evidence to show you. But then again, you kind of know when it's happened as well. If during a programme and during an event, you have people really, doing something where they feel that they're responsible for the success of a project. Because what they've made has been part of something. Without them, it wouldn't have happened. So you're gathering testimony like that.
It's becoming quite tricky, I think, because there's a mood afoot that these things have to be very measurable. And there's also a more interesting approach in America, which is that charities like ourselves should actually assess themselves in a slightly different way, and a lot of them assess themselves on whether they're breaking even or making a profit, and not on what they actually do, what they produce. So you could be successful in the sense that you're not bankrupt, but you could also be on the edge of being bankrupt and be doing much more in the way of what your remit is, and that they've been judging.
That's where we stand.
There's been a general judging of companies as to whether they're solvent, and actually it's their stock and their success is whether they broke a community intervention. That might be, substance abuse, or it might be art, but whatever it is that charity's doing, it's not really the best way of judging it. So also banks and people like that would, if you want to get loans, which sometimes we've had to get involved with, they would judge you on those same criteria, not on how successful you are in producing whatever it is you're supposed to be producing, which is changing, community change maybe, or it could be a very nice event, and it's very tricky, and we're trying to argue now that the softer results have to be measured in some way. And then it's been said that actually they have to be now validated by university, say. So if you were, one of you were at university and you wrote a paper on it, and then someone else looked at that and evaluated and decided that was the truth, then suddenly it's true. So that there's a move now, particularly in a university in Kent, and with a group called People United, who are looking at our sort of type of community art and doing it purely to see what the assessment is. And they're incredibly rigorous, and what's interesting is that they did a project in a community there, and they interviewed everyone in 5 schools, and then they didn't work in 2 of the schools, and then they interviewed them all through the process, including the 2 they weren't working in, and then had some idea. And it was about art and niceness, which sounds a bit weird, but it was like, they'd come and ask you, would you do a spontaneous act to help someone else? And how do you feel about doing spontaneous acts to help someone else? And how do you feel about being nice to people? And then they carried out the workshops, and then they interviewed, and of course the schools that had had the workshops were markedly different from the schools that didn't have. Though again, it's a bit like medical experience, you've then got a load of people that didn't have it. We find that quite difficult. How do you measure the lot that don't get it? And do you decide that that lot, you know, have got cancer, don't get the drug, and they will die in order to prove that the drug's effective? It's a similar sort of thing, but it does mean that there's some level where now there's going to be some paper that says there's a palliative value to art. You know, art or community art intervention can help people find a better way of being with each other. Creativity, maybe.
Do you ever have like really tricky clients? Like, how do you get on with them if you don't want to do the same thing that they want to do?
Yeah, it can be. We've had a few. We were asked today about whether we'd had one that had failed, which is quite a difficult question in an interview. Tell us about the project, one of the projects you've had that's failed, and how you managed to turn it round. And that created a moment of sort of being put on the spot, and a moment of animal fear. And then you know where it's gone wrong. It's just by being horribly honest is the only way of turning them round. And we've had situations where we have sat around with people who are not happy with what they've got, partly because maybe they hadn't articulated what they wanted quite right, partly maybe because we haven't understood. There's a danger, we're quite enthusiastic as you can probably see, so there's a danger that you double guess what someone's saying to you, and you keep saying what they want, and then you think they're on board with you, and then when they see it, it's not quite what they'd imagine, because you don't actually know. You know, I don't know, when we describe something to you, we don't know what you got out, what you think that is. It's only when you see it that you know what it is. So we've been very expansive and big about it, and then they see it and it's a load of old sticks, you know, and they thought it would be something else. Or, you know, so I suppose there's a level where, generally speaking, honesty and a sit-down conversation is the best method. And then sometimes we've had a few occasions where you just have to agree that it's a mistake, you know. And then, I suppose luckily because we've got have had backing behind us, we've been able to maybe not charge as much, come to a compromise.
So is that how you get on with them, by just like being honest? And
I think that it's best.
You've got to unpick what the expectations are, and you know, if you can get that clear at the very beginning, that the client has exactly the same idea of what it is that you're doing. So you're doing everything you can to communicate with them what it is that your vision is. You're talking to them constantly. You're keeping them in the loop as that development's come. You know, and however much you do that, it may still happen that they just don't get it, and then they get to the end and say, "Oh, right, that's it, is it? That's not what I thought when you said 7 metre literary. I didn't see that." You know, but you can give them diagrams. You can give them other examples of work, and they just might not quite.
Do you ever get we were talking about it last week?
Isn't that much?
Especially, I found, like, making music videos, and you'd agree with the band and you give them the brief, and then you get to the shoot and they'd had a band rehearsal and they change the idea, or you're halfway through and then they say, "We want to do this." Do you ever find that
we get that less because of the sort of field we're in, where people generally want us to deal with it, but occasionally we've had that, and you're thinking, oh, some of the floats maybe for pride or something, you've got one thing and then someone else, and sometimes you're dealing with a group commissioning you that isn't an individual, and we quite often don't have contracts because it's not necessarily easy to get contracts in some settings. There's a sort of verbal contract obviously to do it, but it's not always possible to tie down that type of contract. And then we've recently had a show in Chichester that's been postponed because of bad weather. Now we would have gone ahead ourselves, we do shows in all sorts of horrible weather. There was a good logic to not go ahead, but then you're worried about the contract and the anticipation and whether you can do it again. So we've been asked to do it again, and we'll come to some agreement where, you know, we can cover the costs that we couldn't. It was the day before. There's costs that we've had to meet, that we'll have to meet again, you know, because we hired some, it was involving video projection, we've hired a large amount of video projection equipment. And someone will give us a discount, but they will want the money, you know. Yeah, so, yeah, this was something else. Is it in there?
I don't know.
What is it? Oh, this is, there's a puppet. That's just an idea of something that's not. This is actually made with a company called Kinetico as a collaboration.
So cool.
I might not be working.
I don't know if this is.
Yeah. So he's a little puppet, and then colour. And he comes with
Sometimes they call
this whole load of gubbins here to operate him, a large amount of gubbins, so that he can sort of do different things.
The arms and legs like movable.
Yeah, so you can.
So there is
You get a whole team with this thing. You wouldn't want to be in it.
Can I have a picture of that?
I think he's more. He's quite.
It's the battery pack in the heart.
So this is
Suppose it makes sense.
harness rig.
But he's come back to have his leg done because his light's gone out in one of his legs. Haven't you? Well, some of them, the eyes move. I think this one's not moving.
There's a long pole that comes off the front of this, which would probably reach to about where you are standing there,
And then you have a team.
which goes into his back. Which, when he's on it, balances is counterbalanced by this, so that it all nicely sort of just sits and puts nicely on your shoulder. And you can manipulate his head forward and back and side to side. We did have a thing for the eyes to go, you know.
These are based on, I don't know if any of you know the Little Prince, the story of the Little Prince, where he comes and sees different works. So he's part of a big project which we'll be doing with Kinetico. He's got an older sibling who's sort of this sort of height. And the idea is that he's curious, this one. There's a set of them, I think there's 18 of them, and they're all around the country, and occasionally they meet up in a number of them. They've all got Facebook pages, a lot of them. So I seem to be a friend of them, so I get all this weird Facebook content. I think, who the hell's that? It's a puppet that I'm friends with.
Yeah.
There's Curious George. This one's Prince Sunflower, isn't it? And then there's some female ones as well. They're all basically made. And this is working with a group called Kinetico who have been running this program. So we do quite a lot of collaborations with other companies. Sometimes because we've got a particular skill base, so I have to lie to all these things. And sometimes because
I think that might be my son.
we've got a client group.
Who's that?
He's good. The other one's huge. This one lives in its suitcase.
That's brilliant. You had a really long day. But, so was there any more questions?
Yeah,
I think we've got through them all actually.
Okay, brilliant.
yeah.
But I think we've already, he's already answered it about they don't get any profit. And yeah, all of them have been asked. Okay.
Well, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.